They were exiled by the galaxy, but Earth took them. I remember the exact moment we stopped hoping. It was not when the galactic conclave read out our sentence. It was not when the last friendly port closed its docking bay doors and turned off its welcome lights. It was not even when our food reserves dropped below 40% and the elders started holding quiet meetings that they thought the rest of us could not hear. It was a Tuesday. I did not know what a Tuesday was back then. I learned later that humans divide their time into something called a week, and that Tuesday sits in the middle of it, unremarkable and forgettable, which made it a fitting day for us to give up. My name is Kale Dros. I am Vithani. At the time of our exile, I was 23 years old by our calendar, which made me something like 31 in human years. I worked as a junior communications officer aboard our flagship, the Vethkara. My job was to listen to the stars. For 11 years, the stars said nothing useful back. Let me tell you why we were exiled. Because the Conclave's version of the story is not the true one. Our people had lived on a world called Vetharu for a long time. Not our home planet. That was lost generations before I was born. Vetharu was our burial world. Every Vithani who died was brought there. It was the place where we sent our people when they were finished with living, so they could rest in the same soil as everyone who came before them. It was not a military base. It was not a resource hub. It was a graveyard, the most sacred thing we had left. The Galactic Conclave wanted to build a hyperspace corridor through that system. The route would cut travel time between two major trade hubs by almost 30%. Commercially, it made perfect sense. Morally, it was monstrous. We said no. They exiled us for that. 4.2 million Vithani, scattered across 31 generation ships, cast out of every port, every station, every docking ring that answered to the Conclave. That was most of the known galaxy. Trade rights canceled. Citizenship revoked. We became people who officially did not exist. 11 years we drifted. I will not describe all of it, because some memories are too heavy to carry in words. I will only say that we lost people. We lost many people. Not to violence, but to the slower cruelties. Illness without medicine, cold without power, despair without end. Children were born on those ships who had never stood on solid ground. Old people died having never seen it again. And those of us in the middle, people like me, we kept working. We kept the systems running. We kept listening to frequencies that never answered us. Until one did. I almost missed it. The signal was on a frequency so casual, so informal, that my instruments had automatically flagged it as noise. No serious spacefaring civilization used open broadband anymore. It was considered primitive, like shouting in a public square when everyone else had private communicators. But something made me stop and listen. The voice was human. I did not know that yet. I only knew it was warm, and that it was asking a question I had not heard in years. Hello? We're picking up a pretty big cluster of ships out here. You all doing okay? That was it. No diplomatic prefix. No species identification code. No request for credentials or documentation. Just a woman's voice. A little tired, a little curious, floating through space, like she had nothing better to do than check on strangers. I sat in my chair for a full minute before I responded. Her name was Daria Osei. She was the captain of a human cargo hauler called the Second-Hand Star, running a long supply route along the outer edge of mapped space. She had spotted us on her long-range scanner, noticed we were not moving in any purposeful direction, and decided to ask if we needed help. That simple. That extraordinary. Within 3 days, she had patched us through to something called the Earth Interstellar Outreach Bureau. I had never heard of it. The Conclave had never mentioned Earth in any briefing I had attended, except once, in a footnote, described as a premature civilization not yet eligible for formal membership. The Conclave had looked at humanity, young and loud and complicated, and decided they were not worth the paperwork. The woman who appeared on our comm screen was named Director Amara Toussaint. She had short gray hair and the kind of face that looked like it had solved difficult problems before and was not afraid of another one. She listened to our elder council describe 11 years of exile in full detail. She did not interrupt. She did not check her notes or signal to an aide. She just listened. When they finished, she asked one question. "Where do you want to land?" Elder Sarath, who had led our council for 20 years, and who I had never once seen look uncertain, leaned forward and said, "We do not understand." "What are your terms?" Director Toussaint tilted her head slightly. "Terms? What do you want from us? Resources? Labor agreements? What is the cost of your assistance?" She was quiet for a moment, not because she was calculating. I could tell, even through the screen, that she was choosing her words carefully, because she genuinely did not want to offend us. "We want you to get your sick people to a hospital," she said. "We can talk about everything else after that." Elder Sereth had not wept in 11 years. I watched her weep then. We were guided to Titan Station, one of humanity's deep space waypoints, still new, and a little rough around the edges but fully functional. What greeted us there was something I did not have a framework for understanding. They were ready for us. Not because they had weeks to prepare. They had received word of our arrival less than 2 days before our ships docked. And yet the station's medical bay had been expanded with temporary units. Supply crates were stacked in the corridors. There were people everywhere, human people, moving with that particular kind of focused energy that meant they had a purpose and intended to fulfill it. I later learned that Director Toussaint's communication to our fleet had been made public within hours of our first contact. Humans had a system of global and interstellar communication networks that they used constantly, sharing information with a speed and volume that still amazes me. When the story of the Vithani exile spread through those networks, people responded. Volunteer medical teams arranged transport. Humanitarian organizations redirected supplies. Off-duty station workers came in on their free days. A school somewhere on Earth's surface held a fundraiser for Vithani food supplies, organized entirely by children who had heard about us and decided to do something. No one told them to. No governing body issued a mandate. They simply saw a need and moved toward it. I stepped off the docking ramp onto solid floor for the first time in years, and a human teenager walked straight up to me and held out a meal packet and a handmade paper sign. The sign said, in large and slightly uneven letters, "Welcome, you matter." I did not know what to do. I stood there holding the meal packet and staring at the sign, and the teenager grinned at me like they had done something perfectly normal. A woman appeared at my elbow. She was compact, efficient-looking, and carrying a data pad with the expression of someone who had 17 tasks to complete before lunch. "Kale Dros," she said. "I'm Priya Menon, Resettlement and Integration Office. I'll be your liaison while you're on Titan Station." "While we are here," I said carefully. "How long do you expect that to be?" She glanced at her datapad. "That depends entirely on what you want. Let's get you processed first and figure out the rest as we go." I followed her, still holding the meal packet. The days that followed were disorienting in a way I could not have predicted. I had expected bureaucracy. I had dealt with conclave bureaucracy before. Cold, procedural, designed to process rather than to help. Human bureaucracy was different. It was also disorganized. People argued about the best approach in loud hallways while still somehow completing the task. A doctor named Farhan spent 30 consecutive hours working on Vithani patients, despite having no prior training in Vithani biology. He called xenobiologists on different stations mid-procedure and took notes between surgeries. He made mistakes. He corrected them. He kept going. Priya, in our third meeting, used 3 Vithani words correctly in context. I had not taught them to her. She had looked them up on her own time. These were small things. I know they were small things. But I had spent 11 years in a universe that responded to our existence with closed doors, and these small things felt enormous. Then the conclave arrived. His name was Archlegate Voss, and he came with the quiet confidence of someone who had never been told no, and fully expected to keep that record. He was Dreth, tall and formal, with the kind of manner that made every room feel like a courtroom. He arrived at Earth's orbital embassy and delivered his message directly to Director Toussaint. The message was simple. The Vithani were under conclave exile order. Earth was harboring them. Earth would surrender them within 30 days, or face formal economic sanctions, frozen out of conclave trade agreements, denied access to advanced technology transfers, excluded from conclave-controlled shipping lanes. This was not an empty threat. The conclave controlled the majority of interstellar trade infrastructure. A full sanction could damage Earth's still young interstellar economy in ways that would hurt real people on real worlds. Archlegate Voss delivered all of this with the calm of someone reading a grocery list. Toussaint listened to the entire statement without expression. Then she said she would need 48 hours to prepare Earth's official response. Voss agreed, visibly certain of what that response would contain. He was wrong. I watched the response broadcast live from a common room on Titan Station, surrounded by 200 Vithani who had gathered around a shared screen. Toussaint stood in front of the full assembly feed, composed and unhurried, and read 4 sentences. We have reviewed the Galactic Conclave's legal standing to issue exile orders, and find it does not extend to Earth's sovereign territory. The Vithani are guests of Earth. We do not surrender our guests. You are welcome to discuss trade terms at your earliest convenience, but not today. The common room was silent for a long moment. Then someone laughed. It was not a happy laugh exactly, and not a sad one. It was the laugh of someone who had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time, and had just, unexpectedly, been allowed to set it down for a moment. The sanctions came. Earth's economy felt them. Supply shortages hit several colony stations. There were debates, protests, disagreements, all very human and very loud. Some people were angry about the Vithani situation. Some were passionately in support. Newspapers and networks and public forums argued constantly. It was messy and imperfect and real. One evening I told Priya that we should leave, that we did not want to be the reason human people suffered shortages and economic pain. She had been working late, as she usually was, and she looked up from her datapad and studied me for a moment. "Can I tell you something?" she said. I nodded. When Earth first tried to join the conclave, they rejected us. They said we were too young, too emotional, too unpredictable, too human, basically. She set the datapad down. So we decided to stop asking for their permission and just do our own thing, build our own routes, our own agreements, our own framework. She paused. "You're not a burden, Kale. You're just early." I did not fully understand those words that night. I spent a long time afterward thinking about them. What Priya did not explain, because she was being modest, which I have found is common in humans who are doing significant things, was that Earth's diplomatic teams had quietly begun reaching out to other species. Not powerful ones, not conclave members, others like us. Species that had been sanctioned, sidelined, or dismissed by the conclave over the decades. Small civilizations, scattered ones who had learned, as we had, that the doors of the powerful did not open easily. By the 4th month, Earth had signed mutual aid agreements with 3 of them. By the 8th month, a new interstellar framework was beginning to take shape. Informal, not yet a formal alliance, but built on a simple idea. That access to the stars should not be controlled by one organization. That exile should not be a weapon. That a species asking for help deserved an answer. One night, 18 months after we first arrived at Titan Station, our full council gathered to vote. The question was whether the Vithani would formally petition for permanent resettlement on Earth and its territories, or whether we would continue to seek our own independent world in time. It was not a small question. It carried the weight of everything we had been through and everything we might still become. I had never spoken at a council gathering before. I was junior, still young, still learning, but Elder Sereth called on me, and I stood up. I told them about Dr. Ferran, working through the night with textbooks he had never read before, refusing to stop. I told them about the teenager with the sign, about Priya's 3 Vithani words, about Daria Ose, a cargo hauler captain on a long and lonely route, who had looked at her scanner and simply decided to ask if we were okay. I told them about 4 sentences read aloud by a woman who could have taken the easier path, delivered to an empire that expected surrender, without hesitation and without apology. I spent 11 years waiting for someone to see us, I said. I did not expect it to be a species that the galaxy had also decided to overlook, but I think I understand it now. People who have been told they do not belong have a different relationship with open doors. They are more careful about keeping them open, and they are better at knowing when one needs to exist in the first place. The vote was not unanimous. A portion of our people chose to hold out for their own world, their own soil, their own future entirely. That was a valid and honorable choice, and no one argued against it. But the majority voted to stay, Not as refugees, as residents, as people choosing a place, the way any person chooses a place, because of what it means and who is there. 2 years passed after that vote. I was still working communications, better equipment now, an upgraded array on a busier station. The signals I listened to were different now, more of them. Voices from a dozen worlds that had found each other through the informal network Earth had helped build. I was on shift one evening, running routine monitoring, when I caught something. A distress signal. Faint, coming from far out. I ran the identification. A species called the Murath, exiled 14 months ago for refusing to allow industrial mining on a world they considered sacred. 94 ships. Fewer supplies than we had carried. Worse condition than we had been in. I sat for a moment with my hands above the comm panel. I thought about Tuesday, about 11 years of silence, about a cargo hauler captain asking, with no special authority and no formal reason, if a bunch of strangers in the dark were doing okay. Then I pressed the transmit key. My name is Cale Dross, Communications Officer, Earth Interstellar Outreach. We received your signal. We are very glad you are still out there. I paused. Then I asked them the only question that mattered. Where do you want to land?